Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this warm, beautiful spring, balmy afternoon. It's great to see everyone. Thanks for attending. I know this is 6 to 8 instead of 5 to 7, so we will do the best we can to move forward. First thing I'd like to do is call for an approval of tonight's agenda. Can I get a motion for that? Phil Tillman, thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Tony. Any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor of tonight's agenda, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, that's approved unanimously. Thank you. Also, we have next, I'll accept a motion for approval of our minutes from April 8th. Sonia, is that a motion? Great, thank you. Is there a second? Michelle, thank you. Is there any discussion on those minutes? All right, hearing none.
Mike, I don't want to have a discussion on the minutes,
Yes.
but if I may have one moment.
Certainly.
Just to comment, I talk to folks and they tell me, well, I don't know this is going on. I didn't realize they were doing a charter review. You have PAC 14 here, but if I'm not incorrect, I don't think PAC 14 hits any of the out areas out of Salisbury. And from what Laura's telling me, you would have to have internet access to hit it in Salisbury?
You would need internet access to go to the PAC 14's website or YouTube in order to watch it as a replay.
Okay. My concern is that this is going on, we're making decisions, and I still feel like there is a portion of the public out here that doesn't even know this is occurring. I don't know if the council finds a way to advertise it better, maybe put something into the paper occasionally, or how to go about doing it, but we really need a way to get the word out other than talking to neighbors that this is occurring and give people the opportunity to give input. I look and see what we get in the comments, and they're so few and far between it. It's a shame.
Thanks, Michelle. We'll discuss that in just a moment. Any other comments on the agenda? I'm sorry, on the minutes? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote to approve those minutes of April 8th. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, they're passed unanimously. One of the things I wanted to do is welcome Councilwoman Nicole Ackley. Nicole, you can stay right there. You're good. You just heard those comments. Perhaps you can share with your colleagues those comments, and maybe at your twice-a-month council meetings, at the very least, we can do that and just announce that we're meeting. That will be great. And thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. Michelle, thanks for your comments. See what we can do.
May I add to Michelle's comments
certainly,
as well?
Catherine.
Also, the concern that there's ADA accessibility to these meetings, that there's some way that individuals with disabilities who cannot be here and be present be able to be part of public comments. I think the county council has already addressed that in the way that they have their meetings open for those that need to call in. Is that something that we can also consider as well?
We can certainly try.
Okay.
Thank you, Catherine.
Can I make a comment then too?
You sure can, Dallas.
Just that with the amount of work that we've got to go through and how, we're not quite making through all the way through the agendas, it seems like public comments at the end really only lasting no more than about 15 minutes. Do we maybe just want to work up until the end of the meeting and then have public comments after the 2-hour period of work instead of stopping an hour and a half in?
We're trying to stop, to be technically correct, we're trying to stop about an hour and 40 or an hour and 45 in. We'll try to take that temperature each night. I think it's very important that the public gets the opportunity to weigh in, and perhaps that outweighs our need to, discuss for 10 more minutes. But I hear you, and we'll do the best we can to try and gauge the public out there. Okay,
Sure.
Thank you for the suggestion. Thank you. First thing tonight is a discussion on defining local governing body. There was an email that thank you, Laura. First off, also I'd like to thank Laura, thank Paul Wilbur for being here tonight. Thanks for all your help. Laura sent an email on Monday which defined local governing body, and if you will, we borrowed a definition out of Anne Arundel County. I think I'll read it for the group and for those who may be watching. So to define the local governing body, it is suggested that this might work. Whenever state or federal law confers a power or duty on the county by language that refers to, quote, the local governing body, unquote, or similar language, any action required of the county shall be taken by the county executive and then referred to the county council for confirmation. I have to plead guilty that I don't remember where in our document we got caught up on local governing body, and I will take anybody's recollection that works better than mine. I went and tried to find it. Thank you. Section 102. Thank you, Paul.
It was considered to be an additional.
You want to step into that
Yeah,
microphone for
An additional
us?
sentence at the bottom of
Okay.
102.
Thank you, Paul. So on your first page, that was where we were. Thank you, Paul. There was perhaps a discussion, I do recall it now, on maybe bringing definition of the local governing body. So with that, I'll leave it on the floor. If anybody would like to make a motion to add that to section 102, we can certainly entertain that motion now.
I'll make that
Julie, you'll make that
I will
motion?
make that motion, and that is Anne Arundel, section 1014, where that verbiage can be found.
All right, thank you. Is there a second for that motion?
Could you read that one more time?
I sure will.
Thank you.
Whenever state or federal law confers a power or duty on the county by language that refers to, quote, the local governing body, unquote, or similar language, any action required of the county shall be taken by the county executive and then referred to the county council for confirmation. And we have a motion for that language. We don't yet have a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Michelle. Now we'll open it up for discussion.
Will that alleviate any of the problems with signing contracts? That's what had us pause last time.
It sounds like once the executive signs the contract, then it would have to go to legislation or have to go to the council for them confirmation after he signed the contract.
Not
Or
necessarily.
that person, not necessarily?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
An
So it-
administrative function of the executive is to sign contracts. There's a legislative section in the code right now about contracts of a certain size go to the council.
Okay.
So this is, Paul, and I'll ask, this is really for contract language, really to Catherine's question?
It's mainly, the county, all counties are referred to in state law for different reasons, and often there's this language, local governing body in state law. So this clarifies what that means for Wicomico County.
Thank you. I will offer that I get a little concerned by the last part of it, any action taken by the county executive and then referred to the county council for confirmation. I think I'm sort of where you are, Dallas, that I'm concerned that this might add a layer of confusion, if you will, my own personal thoughts. And
For the annual contracts, yes, that they
Well,
typically, yeah.
it doesn't, again, in exercise of powers, this isn't just about contracts. This is us seeking to add a definition of local governing body. And I guess that would mean across the board. Mr. Wilbur?
Yes, anywhere in state or federal law where it refers to a local governing body, it would be considered to be the county executive and the county council. I mean, we could rework this definition to just say that much if there's concern about
That's just
what
my-
any action
Sure.
means.
What's the group think of that, working a little bit of different language? We don't want to spend all night on this question. Phil?
Laura, you brought this up originally from the council.
I did,
And you
yes.
said there might be an instance that you recall where this was a problem. What
Yeah,
was that?
actually, we recently came across this. We have a program open space conversion that we're in the process of doing. And we're looking to take the program open space from the West Metro core property and putting it on a different piece of property that the county owns. But state law requires that conversion to be approved by the local governing body. Bob Culver, the former county executive, submitted the application by himself without the legislative branch's approval last April. It's just now coming before the county council for its approval, if that helps. So basically, it seems as though the county executive submitted the application, it went through the process at the state level, it came back to the legislative body after the fact that it's already been done. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it should have been before. Exactly, the executive and the council before it was approved by the state.
So does that definition that Mike read help with that?
No.
I don't see how that helps.
Didn't change it.
It would help in the fact that it requires, it's in black and white that it requires the legislative body's approval as well, just not the county executives.
And that makes perfect sense. That way you don't have the type of situation which Laura's sitting here referring to reoccurring.
If the wording makes sense and it does clarify that, then that's fine. That was really my question. If that wording is a little convoluted for me, but if it does clarify it, then that's great.
But it doesn't clarify it on one-year contracts where right now the executive can sign on its own without having to go to council. 2-year contracts can have to go to council.
But Dallas, wouldn't this necessarily send everything both ways? I thought,
It sends everything from the executive then to the
Right.
council. I don't,
that's what I'm saying. It sends everything.
yeah, it just adds another layer of bureaucracy. I mean, I certainly understand on some of the bigger decisions where council needs to be involved, but with the day-to-day administrative tasks that the executive performs, I mean, do you really want to bog down a contract to get office supplies of having to go to council? I mean, I feel like that's too broad of a stroke to address some of the issues. I think there's a better way, and that the definition probably needs to be reworked to specify, and I feel like the charter kind of already does this, specifies what the abilities are of the executive to sign and what has to go to council to sign also. So maybe the definition just gets revised to say, local governing body is this, but still have to take into consideration chapters X, Y, and Z in the charter already that specify who has what authority to sign.
Keep in mind, it's only when it's referring to the local governing body, not all contracts do that.
Sonia?
Didn't Paul offer to try and reword this? Was that an offer to?
Sure.
So can we look at that and then maybe?
I was just thinking as a simplifier, you might say, whenever state or federal laws confer a power or duty on the county by language that refers to the local governing body, that shall mean the county executive and the county council.
Okay.
That's a rough version, but we're trying to make it clear that, like as Laura's example, local governing body is both branches of the government. I can have something for next time, just so you can move on.
But is there still a motion? Was that seconded?
It's been seconded. I'll thank you. I'll get to that. So there's a motion on the floor in a second. I'm going to weigh in, and let's take advantage of Mr. Wilbur's offer. Maybe we just, let's vote on this I don't want to vote on the motion. What if,
Does a motion to table
Yes.
override that?
that's what thank you, parliamentary wise, I think a motion to table would do that and bring it back at the next, or at a future meeting. So can I have a motion to table? Thank you, Phil. Is there a second? Tony, thank you. Discussion on that. Okay, all those in favor of tabling this and having Mr. Wilbur report back to us, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you.
I
Thank
think
you.
I think as was fine, but the majority wants to go that way, so we'll go that way.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Okay, we are, where we left off last time was section 202, we were pretty hung up on Article D, and I've had conversation with Mr. Wilbur, and I'd like to offer for the group, there is, he's looking into some options. It's not an apples to apples comparison by any stretch, but there's currently an action happening in Washington County, Maryland, with their county commissioners. It's an ethical violation versus a charter review violation, but Paul is kind of looking at that and looking at some options for us. So I might ask the group that, even though we had robust conversation about it last time, we're not quite there yet. Mr. Wilbur's still doing some work. So okay to move past that and come back to 202D?
Yep.
All right. Then we'll get back to walking through these, 202E. Now into 203, term of office. Looking around, Dallas?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest, and this is going to be also for the executive's term of office, that we put in term limits. I think when you talk to anybody in the public about, especially the federal government, senators, congresspeople, that there's a general support for term limits on the legislative branch. And I think it's something that's worth discussing, not just for the council, but also for the executive.
Thank you, Dallas. Well, Tony?
I don't favor term limits. We have enough trouble getting good people to run locally. There is a term limit already in place. If you don't like who's serving, vote them out. We get people voted out. It's happened in this county. It will continue to happen. That seems to be a catch-all for a lot of people. You know, we'll put a term limit on. Then I start thinking of good people, federal, state, and local, who we're going to lose. And if they're not good, then we ought to take steps to vote them out. That's just my own personal feeling. The exec, we get a good exec, I'd like to keep him or her. If they're not good, vote them out. That's what the voting machine's all about.
Right now, we're going to have just an open discussion. Anybody who wants to weigh in on the question of term limits, feel free.
I agree with Mr. Sarbanes on that. It's hard enough to find good people to run, good people that know their areas to hold office. And if people don't like them there, then vote them out is the way to go.
Thank you, Michelle. Other thoughts? Dallas, if you'd like to make a motion.
I'll just say that it's been, I've heard input that, candidate X, or council person X is just, they're unbeatable. And so there's never any opportunity. They have a tremendous amount of fundraising abilities and things like that. So it just starts, in my opinion, it starts creating, power stays in power as opposed to trying to make sure that we're getting fresh ideas and fresh people into the council and it just would help, I feel like, open up more people to possibly running. So.
Okay, thank you, Dallas. Do you want to make
Yeah,
a
so
motion?
I'll make the motion to just start by saying, I'll make the motion to add term limits to this section. And then if that passes, we could talk about what those term limits would be, but I'll just start with testing the water and see if there's making a motion for term limits.
All right, great. Thank you, Dallas. Is there a second for that?
I would second that.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Now there's official discussion on that. Again, the motion does not define what the term limit is. It simply says, let's put term limits on the table. And I'll look around the room. Anybody who wishes to make a comment before we take a vote, that'd be great.
Just one comment, was this asked for by the council, or is this something Dallas has just decided he'd like to ask for?
No, no one approached me about it. It's something.
I'm saying in error.
Yeah, it's not on that.
No, it's not
Yeah,
on
that's what
anything
I was-
council
thought maybe
approach.
on
It's
the-
just something that, again, I've looked at what I see happening in legislative branches, and I just think that, sometimes term limits are probably a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Good question, Michelle. Yeah, this isn't on that list of 30-some. Yes, Bob, please.
Dallas, so in Wicomico County, we have 5 districts and 2 at-large. if you're gonna have term limits and somebody is in a district and they get term limited, can they run for the at-large? Or are they term limited out of the county council completely?
Term limits generally mean consecutive, don't they? I mean, if you.
I mean, we have two different forms of county council people, because we have two that are at large, and we have 5 that are within districts. And I'm simply saying, if you have somebody who gets term limited in District 1, and they decide they want to run countywide, are they term limited and they can't run, or can they run? I mean, I think there's a practical problem. We have to, if you're going to term limit it, and I'm not saying it's a good or a bad idea, because we have this dual system, I think it becomes somewhat more complicated than just simply saying we're going to term limit county council people.
I would say flat term limits, because you could also have somebody that runs in District 1 for 2 terms, then moves to District 2, 2 terms, District 3, 2. You could, they can just jump around and extend it out however long. So I would say, yes, term limits as in 2 terms.
I'm going to go to Phil.
And again, I'm using the number
Understood.
2 as an example.
Understood. Phil, I saw your hand first. Yep, we'll get there.
Well, as a person who ran and elected for 4 terms, it'd be hard for me to vote. And I'm sitting next to the mayor. He's been the mayor since the Civil War. I don't. And,
Doug, you
and
can
he's-
challenge that if
and
you
he's
wish.
still,
You may challenge
he's
that.
still the mayor because he's very competent.
Yeah.
And so I would oppose your motion. As much as I usually agree with you, Dallas, I don't agree with that.
It's all good. Thank you, Phil. Mayor? Yes, sir.
I would
Doug?
think that all the council run together at the same time.
That's correct.
They're not staggered.
That's correct.
You could possibly term limit the whole council out.
Correct. Well, you can, to Tony's point, you could term limit them out every 4 years anyway, if 7 new people.
Well, yeah, but I
ran
mean,
in
if you
one.
say 2 terms and they all run, they won again, after 8 years, they're done.
Yeah.
So you
So you'd
got
have
8
to-
brand new people, don't know nothing about the county.
Should have to stagger them then at some point.
That's right, you'd have to go to staggered elections.
I can tell you that the city of Salisbury was in the staggered election business for a long time, and they just got out of it about 10 years ago because it was challenging.
Well,
I'm just offering that,
yeah.
that's all. Any other thoughts on this, what's on the floor? Julie?
I just want to follow up with that. Not
Sure.
only would you have new people all at once, but you'd have lame ducks in there all at once.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote on the motion. There's a motion on the floor to bring term limits, still to be determined, to the charter. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's 2. All those opposed?
No.
That motion does not carry. Thank you. Thank you. Good discussion. Next is compensation, section 204. A, looking around the room. B, going to section 204.1. This is about the compensation commission. I do have a thought on that. I served on the compensation commission, I want to say 4 years ago. And one of the recommendations of the compensation commission was to move when it occurred from the 4th year to the 1st year. The recommendation was made because, let's just use the 3 of us up here. It's the 4th year of our term, and a proposal comes forth to increase the compensation of county council members. It's a difficult conversation to have the year of an election, right? So we're now about to refile and run again. And as we know, public sentiment, that's a big uh-oh when you vote to give yourself a salary increase. So the Compensation Commission, it was a group not quite this large. I think there were about 9 of us. They recommended to move when that occurred to, again, let's use the upcoming election. There will be an election in 2022. The recommendation was the Compensation Committee would get formed in 2023. It would then have 3 years of being in place before any compensation changes occurred. Theory being it was just a better time and place for that discussion than in the fourth year of a term. I'll let everybody digest. Matt, I'm looking at your face. So I'm just sharing that as a point of discussion. Happened to have been on that committee, and that was a recommendation of that committee. Matt, yes?
Yes, I played with this quite a bit today, and first of all, I felt at the first year I felt was too early. I mean, there are just so many things going to happen over a period of time, and it just felt like there was, to be looking that far into the crystal ball was maybe not quite fair. But I agree with the concept that starting in the beginning of that fourth year is really too late. I was playing with the idea of a couple of different things. One was going back to about 18 months, going back to we're talking about November election, backing up 18 months or so to either June or July. I'm thinking the council has to pass a budget in June, so maybe it's July 1. They appoint this commission. The commission is given a timeline in which to complete their work and make their recommendation. And then whether the council would have to have a timeline to make their decision, I don't know. But I'm thinking that would take it far enough away from the election that that it would be fair to the candidates and fair to the public.
Well, Phil, yes, sir, excuse me. Thank you, Matt.
I move that we change the word fourth to first, as you suggested, and the committee you served on suggested. I think that makes sense. The new enough people, they're going to appoint qualified people to review this for them and come back for a recommendation.
Okay.
And it's much better early on than it is late. So I would change that to the first.
All right, thank you, Phil. Is there Laura, excuse me, thank you.
I believe that this is dictated by state law, so you might want to have Mr. Wilbur look at that.
And do that.
Thank you. Phil, would you like to rescind your motion, and we'll come back to that after Paul does some work?
I'll have to check it.
Yeah, Paul will have to check
I
it.
move
Or
we-
we could,
Let me
Go ahead.
say that
Yes,
the
sir.
motion is, we make the recommendation if it complies with state law,
very good, thank you.
and we can move on.
Very good, thank you. Is there a second on that? Is that a second, Tony? That's now on the floor for discussion. And again, that's moving it, just changing from fourth to first.
Do we leave it wide open? Or could the recommendation be made 3 or 4 months afterwards, and then the council basically sit on it? That doesn't seem like what we ought to be doing. Then it starts to become a political football.
It's still within 15 days though, right?
You know, the only thing that changes, I think, is the first year.
Yeah.
Then everything else stays the same. So I'm not sure what you're talking about would apply. It's just, anybody else?
Can I,
Yes, Bob, please,
Just-
Julie, I'll get to you.
for the few people that might be watching on PAC 14, and they may understand this, but we were given suggested changes by members of the county council. And this particular section is one of the sections they suggested we talk about. And if maybe Mr. Tillman could amend his ordinance or his motion, because they're suggesting we change the word resolution to the word
Report.
to report, because I think they're saying that resolution is confused with what the county council does. So if we're going to make a change in this paragraph, then the word resolution in paragraph 1, 2, and 3 should be changed to report. So, and that's the recommendation that was made by the county council.
Change
Member.
resolution to what word?
Report.
I add that to the motion.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Makes sense.
Is there Tony, would you like to second that? Thank you, Bob. We're still open for discussion. Julie, I think I saw your hand.
It was the same comment
All right,
about
thank you.
report, and I didn't know if that was just administrative.
All right.
Or if that didn't need to go, but if we're going to, have it in the suggestion, we might as well include
Well, if
that.
we're going to change the language, it seems to me we ought to
Right.
go ahead and just incorporate that change in.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Laura?
I just want to clarify that. So when the Compensation Allowance Commission comes before the county council, they present the report, but the council doesn't necessarily have to take any action on it. So a resolution isn't presented at that time. So the question is, should a resolution be presented with the report, so they're forced to take some type of action? Or should the word resolution be changed to report, just so that it's presented?
So again, thank you for that, Laura. I will say, as a member of that commission, that when we brought our recommendations before the county council, we were summarily dismissed. We did about a 5-minute report. Thank you very much. There was no discussion, there was no nothing. They wanted no part of our recommendations. I'm offering that again only by experience. So to Laura's point, I think you're suggesting that keeping resolution in there gives it more teeth? Is that?
That's up to
No,
you
I mean,
guys.
I'm asking, I know, I don't want to put you in a different, I think that's what I think you're saying.
I don't think the commission can submit a resolution.
Yeah,
Right.
That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
it's a recommendation, it says it on the second part of
Right.
it, so.
Okay, so
Recommend.
thank you. We have a motion that would change the fourth to the first, and it would change the use of the word resolution to the use of the word report throughout section 204. Matt?
Yeah, I'm still concerned about, okay, they get the report and they take no action.
In the same way that they could take our report that we're on the work we're doing right now and
Right.
take no action, that's correct. In theory, I'm not saying that will happen,
Yeah.
I'm just saying in theory, that could happen.
That's what the commission does.
It's just our report, our recommendation,
We can't make it.
or recommendations.
Does it seem fair to all the parties concerned? The people who spent 2 months or something looking at it, trying to be reasonable and fair to their fellow residents of the county, to the county government, the elected officials, and all of that, and that's a balancing act, no question, okay? And it should not be too politically motivated, because if you've got, 9, 10, 12 people and you haven't totally salted the pot, so to speak, with what you want, then you should come up with something that's reasonable. Seems to me that if we as a public have done that the council should have some obligation to take action.
They took action. The action they took was to thank you, but no thank you.
And that has to remain an option.
That has to remain an option. I agree.
And I don't disagree with that,
Yeah.
but what
That's-
I'm saying is that they be given a timeline to make action rather than just bury it.
Well, they took, again, the action they took was to not act on the recommendations. They didn't punt, they took action. The action was, again,
Okay.
my words, thank you, but no thank you. And they didn't act on any of the recommendations that were made.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think number 3 maybe deals with that a little bit. I don't know, look at number 3 and see if that helps.
So we're going to call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. We're now on section 2, section 3, and section 4. All right, let's move into section 205.
Hold on one.
Yes, Sonia?
Looking at that same proposed charter amendments, the last part of it,
Yeah.
it's just a question because it's on here. Okay, so should they also be required to make, or it just says the Compensation and Allowance Commission, and I'm looking at number 3 on proposed amendments, is currently required to make a recommendation on compensation to be paid to members of the council and county executive. Should they also be required to make a recommendation on the compensation to be paid to the sheriff?
We did not consider that during that time. That was not part of the charge of the compensation committee.
I get
No,
it.
I understand what you're saying. Yep,
Okay.
I understand. Is that something that this group, Mr. Wilbur, I don't know if we're allowed to take a bite out of that apple.
Yeah. I will check that, but I'm not sure that that's something the Compensation Commission has any jurisdiction over.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. We'll look into that. Thank you, Paul. Now we're going to section 205, which has to do with vacancies and filling them. I'm sorry, Laura, yes?
I just wanted to comment on that because.
Comment on what? I'm sorry.
On the Compensation and Allowance Commission,
Yes.
when they do their evaluations or research. My recollection is that they have done research on the sheriff's salary before, just as a courtesy. It's not written in the charter.
Right.
But that was something that council brought up as well, that, you know, perhaps that should be something that they should be required to do.
And Paul, you will look into that.
I'm going to look into
All
that.
right,
I'll
bring that
report back.
Thank you, Laura. And everybody, please, remember, I'm trying to look around. If I don't see you, pound the table or something, get my attention. Thank you very much. Thanks, Laura. Section 205. I know Councilwoman Ackley, that's something that is on her mind. I think if she's prepared to offer some thoughts, or I can offer them, we've had conversation on this, whichever you would prefer. We have the opportunity.
Chair, Vice Chair, Mr. Wilbur, Ms. Hurley, committee members, thank you first for serving. This is an amazing public service you're doing for our county. The charter is quite literally our Bible when making legislation, so this is so appreciated. Thank you very much. I came to speak on Section 206, but
I was close. Sorry.
but if you'd like me to jump to that, and then if you have questions on 205.
And actually, in my notes, I kind of, in 206, said, does this contradict 205? So why don't you go down this, if it's okay with you, you can go down this road.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
if you're
So
comfortable.
in 2016, there was a charter amendment made to have anyone who was appointed to office then run for office in the next presidential election. So just to give you a scenario of what happened, most recently with myself, because you'd think, well, how often does this actually happen? Well, it actually happened twice in a term. So it's pretty frequent. I went through an interview process. I was appointed to the council in July of 2019. I had to file for candidacy in fall of 2019. My election was in 2020. I won that election, so I'm in office. I have to file for another candidacy in 2021, and then I will have my next election in 2022. So as you can imagine, that is a lot of campaigning and political planning, where you don't really have an opportunity to show who you are, as I was only on the council for 4 months and I filed for candidacy. So there's several issues that come into play here. First, I think the largest issue, and one in our county, is finding good qualified candidates that want to run, right? Finding people who want to run. And then the expense of running. There's a price tag with running a campaign, and doing that within a 4-year period is something that you have to find a candidate who can sustain that. So that's one barrier I think this particular charter amendment brings to the table. It is somewhat a deterrent. It was not for myself, although I didn't know I had to run within 6 months of being appointed. I think if that's presented to candidates, it would be a deterrent to even get someone who wanted to be appointed. So that would just be going back to Section 205 with the vacancy and how that's selected. It sounds like it's a lot of description of when I was being selected, so I can't really speak to it. But that would be one barrier of even getting candidates who wanted to be appointed. And I say this for myself, this also happened to a school board member. So when you're looking at these candidates and you're trying to recruit people just for the appointment, if you have a council member who has relocated, or in the Board of Education instance, they happened to pass away when they were in office. So they were just trying to recruit people to do it. It's an obstacle when you know that you have this ahead of you. So that was my suggestion, and if you have any questions for me on either one of those sections, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a real-life example of this and how it just played out. And I appreciate Councilwoman Ackley being here to walk us through that, and those were real circumstances. So let's talk about Section 205. Any thoughts there? I have a thought if nobody else does.
Mike, I have a thought
Yes,
in there
who's
is
that?
that
Who
basically.
Thank you, Michelle. Sorry, I can't. make
I
it.
really think the central committee should be pulled out of that.
Well, that's what,
I don't think they're the best option for finding a candidate that's going to do what we need.
well, that's where my brain was going was, that at least as it reads to me now, it suggests that the only way forward is through the state central committee. Tony, I'll get to you.
All
I
right.
see, I promise. That maybe that's an option of how to move forward. Right now, the swinging gate goes through the state central committee of either party, and maybe that can be an option, but not the only way for, at least that's how I'm reading this, and if somebody else is reading it differently, please let me know. Tony, yes, sir?
I agree. I think it ought to be at the same party. The central committee ought to be out of it. They ought to apply directly to the council. Same party, let the council interview them and make the decision.
Thank you, Tony. Matt, yes, sir?
If an individual is a registered independent,
Yes.
that's not they can't apply?
As it currently reads, that's correct.
So you're saying if it's a Republican who has stepped out or a Democrat has stepped out, then a Republican Democrat
That's
runs?
correct. That's correct.
Or, I mean, it could be appointed.
That's correct. Councilwoman Ackley, yes.
I wanted to add something
Certainly.
quickly to that. I'm sorry, what was the question that you just asked?
Independent.
About
Independence.
So this is definitely a process of trying to recruit people. And I found that when we start deviating from the state law and how the state code writes it, is when it adds more problems. So again, I'm not sure why this charter amendment was made with the motivating factor. I don't know, Mr. Wilbur can maybe speak to it of why they decided to add this. But sometimes the state law reads for a reason. And when you start changing it, you just discover new problems. So that's just my
Thank you.
extra one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Matt, back to your question, that's correct. As currently written, you'd have to replace a member of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party with a similar nominee.
I'm sorry, one question.
Go ahead.
What happens if the individual who's left was an independent? Then it would have,
I think, I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
I'd say it'd be an independent.
I mean,
Apply for
if
it.
an independent were to run, and there's no reason that they can't, and they were to win, and then 2 years later, they were to move out of state, now we've got an independent, but we don't have a central committee for independents, at least I'm not aware of any.
So this says of the political party, so to Mr. Wilbur's point, you're an unaffiliated voter, so they'd have to replace you with an unaffiliated voter. There's discussion about eliminating the state central committee as part of the process. Again, I'm just recapping. Michelle, I think I see you.
Mr. Wilbur, can you explain how the state central committee comes up with these candidates? Is it actually the state, or is it like down here in the case with this last election where it's our local Republican Central Committee?
It's the local.
Yeah, it says the local state central committee. So
Well,
I think people applied.
Sure.
Yeah, I think they applied, they were interviewed, then a slate was presented to the council for a selection.
Wayne, would you, anything you
Anything
want
else?
to say on that, as your recollection?
Yes,
On
that's
how-
exactly what happened.
Okay, thank you.
To Councilwoman Ackley's comments on Section 206,
Yeah.
it would seem to me that it would greatly simplify things if an appointed replacement served out the balance of the term.
Okay.
True.
Yeah. All right, so that's the section 206. Does anybody want to make a motion regarding any aspect of section 205, either A or B? Phil, yes, sir.
I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, sir, yes.
If, this is a stretch, but if I were a registered Republican
That is a stretch, Phil.
and and elected to the county council and passed away, or
Yes.
moved away,
Sure.
better scenario.
Yes.
I would want members of my party to be the one who make the choice,
Exactly.
not the county council, which may be dominated by Democrats.
Yep,
You see my point?
I do.
If there's 7 people on the council and 5 of them are Democrats and I'm a Republican, those 5 Democrats, and this has happened in the history of this council, not this council, this county.
Sure.
And it's way, long time ago.
Yeah.
And it's when Emerson Holloway passed away and was replaced, and he was a Republican, and the Democratic-controlled county council chose his replacement.
They chose a Republican?
And I know that, yes,
Okay.
and they chose somebody who they thought was unelectable in the next term.
Exactly.
That's
So
true,
how would
that's
that,
true.
how would that be any different?
So,
Okay.
the central committee might be unwieldy
Sure.
but they go through the process and I don't think I favor changing that, to tell you the truth.
All right.
What if that was, again, as it's currently written, as I'm reading it, and that doesn't mean I'm reading it right, that the only avenue is through the state central committee? I think I'm hearing some sentiment that that shouldn't be the only avenue, that, if you will, regular Republicans or Democrats could apply directly to the county council instead of having to apply through the state central committee mechanism. That's one of the things I think I'm hearing here, is an option and not just have the state central committee be the avenue.
But then again, you could be down to like 2 councilmen or that are Republicans, so you're submitting a name to 2 people. Whereas the state central committees, how many is on there, 15, 10?
Whatever the number
And
is, sure.
and they are elected
Right?
Yeah,
by Republicans and Democrats to serve
Yeah.
this county. I don't see how any other way you could do that. You can't go to this council, just like Michelle had to, or Nicole had to, when it was 3 and 3. They blocked 2 people. Why?
I think both
Why?
of those, they all came through the central committee process, if I understand.
Yes, but the
if I recall
whole
correctly.
council voted on it, Mike, not the Republicans.
Correct, absolutely. I don't think we're changing any of that.
Well, that needs to be changed because it says political party. It says somewhere in there, or they wouldn't have done it. Why did the entire Wicomico council vote on who would replace Mark Kilmer? The entire council.
Sure, I think that,
Mr.
No, it's
Goss,
only got to be the people representing the party.
I don't think that's, I mean, I don't think
Well, that's what it should
this
say here
says.
before we move on.
Mr.
think the
Goss, now
whole-
I understand what you're saying,
Right,
because
I do too.
because our local committee is an elected committee, the Republican Central or the Democratic
Yeah.
is elected. Then basically, if they give up the names, offer up a name to the council, that should be the person that's put there until the next election,
Yes.
okay?
But the council has to vote on those names recommended by the central committee. The county council does.
The full council,
The full, no, not the full, it can't be the full.
but that's the
That's the way it is
currently
now.
is, yes.
We need to change the verbiage so that only the party that's missing a member votes.
So what if there's only one member? What if there's
Then
only?
he votes.
Right. So if
Then he
you
says
just
aye
said-
and the recommendation.
No,
from
I'm
the
saying,
central-
just out of, for devil's advocate, let's say that there are 6 Democrats and 1 Republican. The 1 Republican moves out. Now you have the central committee put names forward, and you're saying only the people that are on the party, that the person that left can vote. Well, there's no Republicans on there, so now you have no possible way for anybody on the council to vote for the replacement.
No, it's,
That is a scenario, yes.
yeah.
Then out of courtesy, those 6 Democrats should place the nominee on the council.
Okay. This is getting, yes, Julie. Thank you, Doug.
You wanna take a
Oh, this is a hot button,
interesting.
this is a hot button for
Yeah,
Doug.
no.
You
this
noticed
is-
that,
Yeah,
haven't
I
you?
know, yeah. This
Okay.
is getting interesting. Yep. It's all good, everybody. It's all good. Yes, Julie?
2 points. One, Frederick County text is identical to ours in the examples we got with the central committee, et cetera. That's the 1 point. And the comment is, I believe by utilizing the central committee, it gives the sitting council people a buffer, whereas they're not making that decision as elected officials to pick the person that's gonna round out that vacancy. So I like it, that my comment is I like it the way it is, because it seems to have the checks and balances in there.
So
Phil?
Julie, are you saying then you wouldn't need a vote from the council to place that person?
Yeah, because that's the way it is now. The central committee names people, and then the council votes. Everybody on the council, not just that party.
Phil?
It's not perfect, but I think it works.
Okay.
It can work, and so I move that we leave this unchanged.
You don't need to make that motion, but thank you. I understand what you're saying. We'll either have a motion to change it, we're not gonna have a motion to keep it.
Oh, okay.
With me?
Oh, I see.
So if somebody wants to make a motion to change it, we'll entertain that.
Thank you,
But I
Mr.
hear where
Chairman.
your sentiments are.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Matt?
I'm curious and I'm not an independent, but, okay, so, but I'm curious as to what percentage of our registered voters have declared themselves independent?
20%. 20% independent, 38%, 36% Republican, 42% Democrat.
That's in Wicomico County? Is that Wicomico?
In Wycombe.
All right. But again, that's not, I don't think that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about if an independent, I guess your point is that there is no independent state central committee.
Right.
So
You know,
if
an independent can't
were
replace
to
an
move
independent.
away or pass away, what do we do then?
Good question.
So Phil?
That same question would be presented to the council. They would have to come up with a way of soliciting names, probably the way you suggested before. Are there any independents out there who would like to fill this seat? And they could do that.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Not perfect, but it would work.
Is there a reason, because that makes it too political, because if you've got 2 independents and the rest are not, one of the independents leaves and the parties who, the Ds and the Rs all say, well, we want the state central committee to do it, and we're not gonna invite any independents, period. So they don't have a shot, they don't have a chance. And 20% is certainly not a majority, but it's not insignificant.
So how many independents have been on council?
None.
So, no offense, but I feel like we're worried about something that's not been an issue when we have things that are issues in front of us.
Okay,
So-
I give up.
I will entertain this is a good discussion. I'll certainly entertain any motion that someone wants to make to offer any change to either A or B. Remember, right now, we're on section 205, okay?
The only, section 206 is referenced in section 205.
Yeah.
If we're gonna change 206, I think by definition, you've got to change section 205.
What does
Can we do it all at once?
Bob, let me ask you a question. So, as I read 206, it references, of course, 205, but not relative to the party or the.
No,
Right.
I'm not suggesting
Yeah,
that.
okay.
I'm just simply saying that I don't want to lose focus. I'm not suggesting we should change 206, but if we're going to change 206, there's sentences in 205 that reference 206. And it seems to me that we may want to talk about 206 before we make a decision on 205.
Very fair, thank you. That is correct. I just saw section 206 is in the last paragraph of A. Thank you. Thanks,
And
Bob.
it's in B too.
Okay, thank you. So, that's a nice suggestion. Section 206, is there any, I'll allow discussion. We're gonna waver a little bit from 205. We're gonna go to 206. Wayne, you had a comment on that a few moments ago. Would you like to re-offer that at this time on the special election and the filling? And
Yes, I would offer that as a motion that a vacancy, once the new person is appointed, that they serve out the balance of the term of that council.
let me ask for clarifying for Paul, perhaps, or Laura, where would this motion go? And I'm asking the group too. Would this motion eliminate section 206? Is that in fact what it does?
I think it eliminates 206.
Yes,
Right, is that what
I think it does.
Yeah,
And by extension, it would also take the sentences out of 205, A and
Okay.
B.
Wayne, would you like to offer a different motion? I'm not putting words in your mouth, but we're hearing, go ahead, try again.
I'll give you a motion that we strike section 206 from the charter.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
David, second?
Come on.
There's now discussion on that motion to eliminate section 206.
Bob, can you state where you think in section A and B has to be changed?
The last sentence in A,
Yep.
unless there's a special elections described as section 206, that sentence would
I
need to
got
be
you. Okay.
removed. And the same sentence basically appears in B.
So- Is that the one sentence in the whole group that you're talking
In
about?
A, but the same sentence appears in B as well.
Right. Oh, it does in B? Okay. So we're removing with Wayne's,
Well, if you don't have a section 206, by definition,
Those-
you're not going to have a
they
reference.
go away.
Right, they go.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
I don't
Bob.
know how Mr. Wilbur does that. But if that's the recommendation, he writes it, that's what you got to do.
There we go. So right now, we've got a motion to dismiss or eliminate, and a second, section 206, so we're discussing that. Okay,
So just
Yep.
for clarification, if it's dismissed, I mean, do we have to then replace it with something that says for the remainder of the term? I mean, this just says, okay, the person is, doesn't have to do the special election by the presidential thing. I'm just,
perhaps we can address that in section 205 by adding a sentence,
okay.
right?
Okay.
Clarify.
Yeah, to clarify 205. So I'm going to call for the vote on the motion to eliminate section 206 from the charter. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. I'm going to ask the group now, and maybe Bob or Paul might be able to cast their jurist wisdom on how we need to clean that up. And Dallas, if I think I'm hearing you, one of the things we need to look at is, does the language in 205 right now specify that any person appointed rides that appointment out through the remainder of the term?
Yeah, that's
Right?
my question. Do we need
That's
to
it,
add something?
yeah.
I don't know.
And that's one. And two, we would be suggesting eliminating the last line, or, yeah, I guess, I don't know if we need to eliminate it, right, Bob, since it no longer exists, or Paul? Yeah, okay. So is there language currently in 205 that needs to be added to clarify that anyone appointed has a term that rides out to the conclusion or till the next election? Matt, I see your hand up.
Yeah, if I'm reading the sentence correctly. the
Where
last
are you?
sen-
Where are you,
I'm
please?
at 205A, and it says, unless there's a special election as described in 206 to fill the seat, any member shall serve for the unexpired term until his successor qualifies.
So we could just say, we could eliminate the first part of that sentence and just say, any member so elected shall serve for the unexpired term?
Yeah.
Is that
That
right?
would be my
Would you
motion.
like to, that's your motion?
Yeah, I make it that we would, eliminate, unless there's a special election as described in 206 to fill the seat, period.
Okay.
And then it becomes capital A, any member.
Yep.
So elected, and so forth. And then on, in
B, it's the same thing.
205B, I think the wording is the same, isn't it?
Same thing.
Yes.
All right, then the wording would be
All right,
amended accordingly.
thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Wayne. Any discussion on this change? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor of eliminating, modifying that last sentence as described, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that's unanimous. Thank you. We've been at this for an hour. We're going to take a 5-minute break, then we're going to hit section 301. Thank you, everyone. I want to make sure, yielding to the gentleman from Sharptown, I want to make sure that we're clear on section 205. We didn't do anything other than alter the last sentence, right? We didn't alter.
Right.
Are you good with that?
No.
Okay, what would you like to present?
The section one, how, up in the first part of A, on how a vacancy is filled, what body does that, and who votes on it once the vacancy is presented, or the candidate is presented. Right now, I think this whole thing needs to be changed.
Would you like to make? Would you like to
Personal
make?
opinion. I'd like to see where, I'd like to keep it on the central committee. They are the representatives for both parties. The independents will just have to suffer, I guess. And then the verbiage should say, not the majority vote of the remaining members. That needs to be struck. But it should be just the remaining party members, somehow like that.
Would you like to make that a motion?
If Paul can figure out what I just said,
We understand you. We understand.
yeah,
So-
then yes, I'd make that motion.
So,
The opposing party should not be voting for a member of the council to the other side. You can, right now, it's 3 and 3, it would have been 3 and 3 with Nicole. Right now, District 2 could still be without a representative because they'd be hung up, still, waiting for the election.
so I'm going to remind you of Dallas's scenario that
I understand that if there's one person left, that one person votes aye and he moves on.
there might be no people left. If there are 6 Republicans on the council and there's 1 Democrat,
Is that gonna
and the
happen?
Democrat moves away or passes away,
Yeah.
there's no Democrat on the council to vote for the Democrat.
Well, based on what Dallas said with the independents, how often does that happen?
I'm not sure how often it will happen, but we're setting up a scenario where it could happen. And that,
Please don't talk about that.
and I hear you, Doug is making a motion, I'll do this for you. So, about midway through the A,
Yes.
says to, submitted to said county council in writing by the local state central committee. The nominees, sorry, I'm trying to find, if I gone too far?
Yes.
By election, okay, within
Yes.
45 days after the vacancy occurs by the county council, by election by majority vote of the remaining members thereof, Doug
Yes.
would like to make a motion that says by a majority vote of the members of the party of the nominee.
Yes. Yes.
Would you like to make that motion?
Yes, I would.
Doug has made a motion with my assistance. Is there a second to that motion?
But it leaves in the central committee.
Understood.
Okay.
Is there a second to that motion? There's not a second for that motion, Doug, so
I can't believe that.
it's going to stay where it is.
I'll second it for you, Doug.
Who's that? Michelle? Yes. Okay, now the motion is on the floor. Is there discussion on that motion? I'll throw it. Wayne?
Mike,
Yes, sir.
if I'm not mistaken, unaffiliated voters are an increasing population. And I think that if we don't address how you would replace an unaffiliated council member, we're gonna have the possibility of a debacle sometime in the future.
Is that the hang-up? Is that everybody's hang-up that we couldn't replace a independent?
No, I don't. I think that's I think that's a first cousin to what you're talking about.
Wayne,
Respectfully.
then what do you do, add in case we have a libertarian? We have a communist?
Or, no, an unaffiliated. That's an independent.
Unaffiliated.
Right. So for the record.
They're
I'm
voters.
I'm an unaffiliated voter. I'm not registered with either
Right.
party. So we're talking about if I'm a member of the county council, so elected, and I were to leave or pass away, we don't have a provision right now to address that. We have a provision to address the two major parties. That's through the Republican and/or Democratic State Central Committee. However, the motion on the floor, we're going to get to your part, Wayne. The motion on the floor is on Doug's motion, which is that only members of the party in power on the council, only members of the party of the nominee to the council may vote on that nominee. That's the motion. I'm going to call for a vote on that motion.
Can I?
Yes, sir, Bob.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
I
please.
apologize.
No, sir.
And I apologize to Mr. Wilbur because I'm going to do something that I told him I'd try not to do. But I'm going to ask him a question.
Let me step back.
And that is, I haven't researched this, but the county council has the authority to appoint the person who's being, to appoint the person to the vacancy. I don't know how you can take half the county council or 4 members of the county council out. So it would be my gut that what's being proposed, while it may have merit, is probably not legal because it's the county council prerogative to make the replacement.
And I would say, why don't we vote on the motion, and if the motion passes, then we'll check legality.
Fair. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Paul. Okay, we will now vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
That's, I think, 2. Please raise your hands. I want to make sure I get that. Thank you. All those opposed, please say no. Opposed? No. Okay, so that motion fails. Thank you for offering it. Wayne, you're bringing up a different point, which is the unaffiliated voters. There is a train wreck potential if that, again, if that segment of the voting population is rising. Does the group see an inherent challenge or problem because there's no provision in here for an unaffiliated voter?
Obviously.
Could be.
Is there anything in any of the other charters that we've reviewed that deals with that problem?
I don't think so. But I haven't looked at every single
Yeah, I guess
word.
you don't
Yeah.
reinvent the wheel if somebody else has done it for us.
Fair, but what does this group want to do? Yes, Tony?
It might be the only way is anyone who's unaffiliated puts his name in the county council and have to pick him. Doesn't have a party.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Could be.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll do that.
So this would add a line that says an unaffiliated voter puts his or her name in to fill the vacant position of an unaffiliated voter who has left
And
office.
we decided by the county council.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there a second on that?
I'll second.
Phil, Wayne, that's a second. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Does that also, is there anything we need to change in 205B to address that? Anyone? I think, or are we good? Yes, Sonia?
The only thing, and I'm not trying to belabor it at all, is with all the things that are happening, and this is for the next 10 years, if there's other parties, but I think that if that happened to be the case, if there was a third party, or something like that, that even if they don't have a central committee, there's a way that it says that it needs to be filled, and so I think it's kind of separate than the unaffiliated voter, but it's just something to keep in mind if they don't have a separate, a central committee at that time.
Sonia, are you saying maybe we need to define unaffiliated?
Well, I asked the question during the break if independent, because they say, and we say independent party, and that's when Julie looked up and she's like, no, it's unaffiliated. That's what that is. In the case of what I'm thinking about, it's actually some things that are coming up that are parties, right? So this state's party in there, they might not have a central committee, but because it needs to be filled with a person from a party already, it's something where it probably would go to the council. I don't think that it needs another provision in here. I was just mentioning that, because I'm thinking 10 years in the future, you know, if we're thinking about the future, we need to think about what happened in the past, and we have all that experience too, but we're looking into the future, and we know things are changing.
So,
So I have no motion. It was really a comment.
understood. Thank you.
I'd look as an independent who's someone who's not, doesn't want to be labeled Republican or Democrat, and there is no real party.
Right, exactly, unaffiliated, that's unaffiliated, and I'm talking about if there happened to be, I don't know, a Repub-ocrat party.
Sure. Julie?
You ready for this one?
I don't know.
Frederick County says, if the council fails to fill the vacancy, this is their section, pursuant to the provisions of this section, the executive shall appoint the person to fill the vacancy.
Where is that?
In Frederick County.
Frederick County Charter, section 205.
What county?
Frederick.
Okay, thank you.
It seems to me that we need to fix B also. Wayne, you want to make a motion, or we can apply that same motion to section B? Because, again, this is the governor.
Yes.
And we could say if there's no, again, what we just applied before.
Yes.
We would ask the governor to appoint an unaffiliated voter instead of one from a party. Is that what we're saying in B?
Yes. That's what I'm suggesting.
205B?
Yes. Because again, there's a provision in there about appointments that the governor might have to appoint someone of the same party as recommended by the local state central committee.
Yeah, but if you have somebody on, right now, if you have somebody unaffiliated, there is no state central committee, so doesn't that negate the governor doing anything?
Well, I think that's what, if there's no state central committee for an unaffiliated voter, the governor has to have an option to fill that seat, I guess is what. So do we need, I'm asking the group, come on now, do we need a motion here? I know this is hard. Do we need to address anything in B? Okay, we're gonna let that stand. Okay, good work, everybody. Let's see if we can cruise for a little bit. Article 3, the legislative branch, section 301, compensation, or I'm sorry, composition. Section 302. Section 303. Section 304.
I have a
Catherine, I think I see your finger.
I'm just looking to see what was recommended. So we have section 304, but that's C.
Letter C.
Removed by resolution. Where is that? In C, okay.
The council may at its discretion and subject to the provisions in its budget or supplementary appropriation by resolution, engage the services of experts, consultants, or attorneys.
And there was a suggestion to remove by resolution.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go down. Oh,
There was
Bob?
a suggestion made that the charter be amended to be consistent with, or similar to Hartford County, which has a specific provision that allows specifically states that the county council can have an office of council attorney.
And that's the rabbit hole I'm about to go down, because I think that's, in this section, it seems to me, the question of the council having a separate attorney would be where this would perhaps be discussed. Because, so background, right, I'm going to try to do the background as best I can. And we'll get into that later because there's a Department of Law. But this provision says that the council may engage the services of experts, consultants, or attorneys to aid it in its inquiries, investigations, or the drafting or codification of legislation. What we currently have in our county government is a county attorney, and that's currently Mr. Wilbur, and we have a county council attorney, which is a position that is currently vacant. And I believe the county council is working on filling that position. At least as I read it, and again, I'm going to drop this on the table, and I need help here. I don't see where we currently have in our charter a provision for a permanent county council attorney. This seems to me to suggest that they can hire one, if you will, as needed. And again, I'm going to offer an opinion. As someone who does watch and pay attention, it's often been a little bit awkward to have the county attorney opining with opining X on a topic, and the county council attorney on the same topic opining Y. I'm not saying which is right. I'm saying that presents the optics of that, at least from where I sit, those are bad optics. If this committee wanted to go down that road, it would seem to me, and anybody please correct me if I'm wrong, that this is where we might address that. Tony.
If I could go back to 2004,
Sure.
the county council went through the charter as proposed by a committee. And it called for a Department of Law. And I remember I said to the other members, I said, you know, that sounds like we're going to have one lawyer, one attorney, who is going to be advising both bodies. And I said, as long as they get along, that will work. But the minute, I said, think about who appoints the attorney. It's going to be the county exec. The minute they don't get along, then we got a problem. And unfortunately, I think we saw that happen. If I'm wrong, people can correct me. So I don't know where we go with it. And I think as we look at today's world, I think we're going to end up with the county exec having an attorney who will advise him on what he's doing. And we're going to have a county council attorney also advising. I'm not saying that's ideal, but I remember saying that, and I really got laughed at when I said it, was one attorney can't serve two masters.
Sure.
That's true.
And I shouldn't say it that way, but that's how I felt about it
Thank
at
you,
the
Tony.
time. That was a long time ago.
Sure. Laura, your hand. Thank you. Thank you, Tony.
So I believe on that list of questions submitted by the county council, there's also a question as to whether or not there should be an in-house legal department. Right now, Mr. Wilbur is, he's outside counsel, but he still has the law department's budget. And then for that charter section specifically, keep in mind, not only do we appoint an attorney by resolution, we also have times where we're appointing forensic auditors.
Sure.
And we may not want the public to know that we have done that. It could also be a litigation attorney that we would want to appoint that we would not want the public to know either. So that's if it's done by resolution, then it comes to council at a public meeting.
Right.
So that's where the concern was.
Mike?
Yes, Dallas. Sorry. Thank you.
So I certainly don't fault the council for needing to talk to an attorney or having one on staff and needing an administrator. I've got a bit of an issue where if the executive wants to have a lawyer, the lawyer has to be appointed by the council. If the executive wants to have an administrator, the administrator has to get it appointed by the council or approved by the council. Meanwhile, the council has no checks and balances on itself. It can hire who it wants without the approval of the other side, whether it be for an administrator or for a lawyer. I firmly believe in checks and balances, and there is none here. And I think that if there is going to be a council lawyer and a council administrator, that when they find out who they want, they should get the sign off from the executive, the same way the executive has to get the sign off from the legislative branch for hiring a lawyer and an administrator. Or conversely, the opposite. If the council doesn't have to get approval for their administrator and for their lawyer, then the executive should not have to get it. I think it should be fair for both sides on the executive and the legislative.
Thank you, Dallas. I will opine that, again, if we're paying any attention at all over the last 5 years or so, what we're talking about right now is really kind of the crux of some of the challenge points. And this is a tough rabbit hole to go down, but I think this is one of our charges, is to offer, not to punt. I think everyone is seeking appropriate redress. Dallas just makes a really strong point. The county executive must go to the county council for approval of appointees. The county council does not have to do that in reverse. I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying that's the is. This section, to Laura's point, seems to suggest that if the county council at any point in time feels a need to hire an outside counsel for a specific task, this gives them the right to do it. But at least as I'm reading it, and I don't see anything in the charter at this time that allows the county council to have its own attorney. In section 500, that addresses the Department of Law, which has been established, but was not necessarily adhered to, according to some, by the last county executive. So I'll be quiet. I know this is tough territory here, but Catherine, so we are on section 304C, okay? And we are, in my notes, just going over this. I'll get to you, Matt. Okay. Thank you. I simply wrote next to it, CC permanent attorney ? So those are my shorthand notes that, okay, this is where that might fall. That was for me. Matt?
Paul, or can you clarify what the difference is between having by resolution in there versus striking it?
Well, as Laura said, by resolution means it's going to be at a public meeting, and there may be, as Laura says, a reason to have some confidentiality about that selection. For a forensic auditor, for instance, you might not want to telegraph what you're going to investigate.
So to make it simple, may I make a motion to strike by resolution?
A second.
Okay, there's a motion to strike by resolution and a second from Sonia. A motion by Catherine, a second from Sonia. Discussion on that? Julie?
I'm worried about transparency. I know that there's closed sessions, executive sessions, where you talk about things that you cannot divulge, but you could enter a resolution to hire an agency. I have a problem with transparency on that level and also on staff attorney level. Right now, it's a circulating situation, where it can change. But if you have one person hired as staff, they have different obligations than someone that's contractual. And I believe that you can enter into contracts, for instance, like economic development, that are not open to the public, but you're still entering into an obligation.
So Julie, let me play that out, and Paul, help me out. If by resolution stays in here, a resolution might read by the county council. County council is authorizing special counsel to discuss a private matter. Can it be left at that? Or would it have to say the county council wishes to hire a special attorney or a special forensic auditor? That's where Julie, help me out here. Is that where your transparency concerns come?
I think in terms of hiring and having it as part of a resolution, it could be a resolution that just says, Sue Smith will be hired as special attorney
to the
period,
council. Yeah.
without going into the confidential nature of whatever the task is, or a forensic auditor.
Or consultant of some type,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you think, Paul, there is any one way is better than the other relative to by resolution or not by resolution? Do you think that we are, I'll go to Julie's point, is transparency being put at risk if we get rid of the phrase by resolution? I'm simply asking, I'm not taking a position.
Well, certainly a resolution is the most transparent way to do it.
All right.
I think that it can be done by resolution, but a very brief, succinct, and not revealing resolution.
And if it wasn't done by resolution, how would they do it? How would they hire said individual? Privately without it ever coming before the public?
That's the way it would have to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mike.
Yes,
In the-
Sharon, thank
in
you.
the- in the definitions, the word resolution shall mean a measure adopted by the county council having the force and effect of law, but of a temporary or administrative character.
Okay.
So I think, to Paul's point, resolution needs to stay there.
Thank
and
you.
End it there.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this, is there in this provision, could the council hire a consultant and just say, oh, we hired so-and-so, but they don't have to get the executive to approve it or even tell them about it, or her?
It's already in the
Paul?
budget.
Yes,
They've done that.
They already
Yes.
do that.
Right, a consultant could be hired without the knowledge of the executive. Yes.
Whether the word resolution is in there or
Well,
not.
I mean, certainly when it would go to a meeting,
Yes,
it would be out there,
fair.
but all the preliminary work could be without any input from the executive.
Thank you. Sonia?
So just to clarify for Sharon's definition of resolution, excuse me, so isn't that one way for I won't say your concern, but the concern about having a permanent attorney? If it's something that's temporary, that a resolution would avoid it being something that's permanent. It's for a specific reason. That's one thing. And again, these are not motions, these are just things
Yep.
that I'm thinking about, and I'm asking for clarification.
Yep.
And then the second one is, I'm all about transparency, so I appreciate that. I'm also very cognizant, like when you said, did you Google that people can Google. So if that's gonna be, it needs to not have a name. Because you can always, because in these days, you can figure out, if you wanna keep something really private, it needs to be real generic. So that was just another concern, and that's not changing, that's going more and more to the fact that you can find out anything.
So Sonia, I would say to the first point, the motion on the floor right now is not really discussing the permanent county attorney position. It's really
It was the resolution.
this resolution question. So Laura, please, thank you.
So a lot of contracts, including our council attorney's contract, is approved by resolution. The contracts can be, less than a year, they could be 20 years. So I get where you're saying that it's temporary, not permanent, but it's a long temporary.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Tony? Yes, sir.
I guess, Paul, if the council wants to hire an attorney without the exec knowing it, fiscally, is there a line item in there where they have a certain cash? I don't know, maybe Wayne, you can answer it, but all of a sudden they're hiring an attorney at X dollars per hour.
But I think within the council budget, there's
They
a
put a
line
line
item for
Okay.
But see,
consultants,
here, this
experts.
brings up the other part of it, though. Like you're saying, when they're hiring folks, they have to pay for them. The council has approval of its own budget. The executive, the way I understand it, the executive puts forward the budget, the council approves it. The council puts forward their own budget, and I don't believe anybody approves it but themselves. So now you've given them the ability to hire anybody they want without telling anybody, spending any amount. And oh, by the way, the money that they're spending on council still has to come out of the slice of the pie for the whole county. So there's no checks and balance. Hire who you want, pay what you want, no oversight. It's just, it does not seem like that's the way any form of government in the U.S. works. There's always a checks and balance. And I'll eventually bring that one up too when we get to the budget, that I feel like the executive should have oversight over the council's budget the way the council has oversight over the executive's budget.
Tricky.
It is,
Yep,
but there's, yeah.
So let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's call for the vote on the motion on the floor, which is to get rid of the words "by resolution." Okay? That's the motion that we're going to vote on. Everybody clear on that? All right, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor of getting rid of the words "by resolution" in section C, please say aye.
Aye.
Please raise your hand because this is one of, all right, that's 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. All those opposed, please say no. No.
No.
No.
Okay, so that motion does not carry. Okay, thank you. Back to the, if the group thinks this, and I'm looking around the table here, if the group thinks this is the right place to have a discussion about the permanent county council attorney position, is this the right place for that? I'm looking around
When
to,
we get back to the Department of Law.
pardon me?
I'm sorry.
No, what is your,
There is a Department of Law section farther back.
Correct.
We want to wait till we get to that.
okay, that's your suggestion, thank you. Doubt.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Bob,
I mean, I
please.
think they're two separate things.
Okay,
I'm not advocating doing it,
I understand.
but I mean, I think the county council, under this section, I think they can hire their own attorney if they choose to.
Yeah.
It's just not a permanent. It's just been suggested by, I don't think it was suggested by the county council, it was suggested by a citizen that it should be considered to be a permanent position and put in the charter. And the suggestion was to use the language that was in Hartford County. So I think the real question is whether the committee believes that you should make it a charter position, or it should be left where it is, and it's up to the discretion of the county council as to whether they need it or not.
And Bob, correct me, this is, Bob has provided.
No, that's a different section.
I apologize, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Now, we were provided with,
thank you.
from comments,
Yes,
and we were provided with a copy of the Hartford County provisions.
okay.
And I have not talked to Hartford County, I don't know how it works in Hartford County, but they have a specific provision that has a specific office of council attorney. And the council attorney can hire assistants, but they also have a people's counsel.
Okay.
I
They got a lot.
mean, they have a lot.
They got a lot.
I'm not
Okay.
suggesting we should do that. It's just-
Understood. So, Bob, I think if I'm hearing you right, section C, what's missing there is the word permanent.
It is not, it is, as I read this, this is at the prerogative and discretion of the county council. They can hire one, they can do it essentially continuously if they choose to, but they could hire one for 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years. I mean, if we put it in the charter, it's no longer a discretionary matter, it becomes a permanent position.
Right.
I'm not in favor of that.
You're not in favor of what?
Of putting in, I mean, if you, like you just said, if you put in a permanent council attorney that then's hiring staff, and, you know, you're just adding a lot more cost to government. I don't fault the council for needing to have access to a lawyer, I just,
So,
and
I'm looking, forwarding.
it sounds like we're creating 2 law departments, basically.
So we could, as a group, and I'm going to look to the group here, remember in section 507, that's where Department of Law comes. Is this perhaps a better discussion for then, and we leave right now section 304C as is? Again, I'm just looking to the group. Thoughts? I see one head nodding. Would the group like to wait until we get to Department of Law to discuss the permanence of the county council attorney? Is the direct question that I'm asking the group.
Yes, raise your hand.
Yes, raise your hand. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Sorry, I'm trying here. So we will postpone this, and we will bring Section 304C, if we, and as we address Department of Law, we will come back, okay?
I would like to make a motion.
Yes.
And I would like to make the motion that the council administrator and any of the positions described in Section C have to be approved by the county executive to have that oversight, to have that checks and balance.
Okay,
Because
there's a-
the administrator, and again, I explained it, the administrator and everyone else on the
Has to-
executive side has to be approved by the council. I think that door needs to swing both ways.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second for that motion? Again, is there a second for that motion? Okay, there's no second for that motion. Thank you. Catherine, you were going to,
Just for clarification,
Yes.
when would that occur? I mean, I'm just looking for a situation where the county council was hiring an attorney and the exec wasn't aware of it. I mean, have we had issues like this
Yes,
I mean-
it has happened.
routinely?
I would not say routinely, but it has happened.
This past cycle, the council hired an attorney
Yes.
and at the same time was trying to not approve the executive's selection for attorney. So they didn't want the executive to have who he wanted, but the council wanted to have who they wanted. And it was,
and
in my
this
mind, it
is-
didn't sit well. There was no checks and balance. It was not.
this will be, yes, Laura?
Just to clarify, we were looking to hire a litigation attorney,
Okay,
so that was the reason why.
But that attorney was held on for a lot longer than just for litigation.
so we've agreed we're going to go down this rabbit hole when we get to section 500, right? That's what we've agreed? All right, thank you. We've got a few more minutes. Let's plow through a little bit. Section 305, all of it has to do with the county internal auditor. So I'm looking around the room. A, B, C, D, E, F. Thoughts on the auditor? All right.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah, again, I'll say, I feel like the auditor position should also be approved by the executive. And then specifically down on part F, where it says the auditor's actions are exempt from executive veto, I disagree with that. Again, it just seems like I hate to say it, it seems like a weaponized position against the executive.
I guess I'll ask, Dallas, you've raised that. I will ask if anybody, either Laura or Paul, could provide, when did the position of county internal, or Wayne, you've been there for a while, when did the position of county internal auditor, when was that created? Does anyone know?
It was there when I arrived,
Okay.
so I don't know what year it
And
was created.
Tony and Phil, could either of you, was there an auditor position that fell under the council that you can recall?
I don't remember
No.
the time.
Sharon, thank you. Yes.
I remember the circumstances. There was some concern about the detention center.
Okay.
And the funds out there
All right.
were not really subject to the Big Crow and Stern auditor, and so they
Excuse-
thought it
folks,
was
order.
advisable.
Hey,
Do you remember that?
Sharon and Tony, help me out here.
Sharon, do you remember that?
Yeah,
So-
the internal auditor didn't come until Rick came. It was there before Wayne, but shortly after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
And who-
Shortly before, I'm sorry.
And who created it? The council or the executive?
It
does
was
any-
done in the charter, I believe.
There was a charter amendment in 2010.
All right, thank you. So this was created as a charter amendment in
Yes.
2010. Thank you, this whole section. Thank you. Laura, I apologize.
I was just gonna say, the internal auditor's position, was also a result of the fuel theft
Yes,
that happened back in, I think it was in 2008.
yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then Steve Roser was our internal auditor, he came on in 2010.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I don't dispute the need
No,
for an
understood.
internal auditor. I just feel
Understood.
like the hiring of that position, and I'll make that the first motion, that the auditor, internal auditor position should be approved by the executive.
I'll second that.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second for the position of auditor to be approved by both the council and the executive? Is
Yes.
that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
And that's a second? Is there discussion on that?
I get,
Phil, please, yes, sir.
I'm just thinking, I hadn't thought of this before, so excuse me for that. The county executive appoints all the department heads. The department heads report to him only.
Yeah.
By charter, the county council can't even go to a department head and say, we want you to pave this certain road or whatever. So the internal auditor, I think by definition, internal and independent, it's almost like he's an independent. He can go to any department and audit, and he probably should just report to the county council if that's the case. I'm thinking of this for the first time, but.
Yeah, so, and
that's my
I'll
initial thought.
bounce that back at you. Why should he or she just report back to the county council and not also report to the county executive?
Especially if you look at section C.
Go ahead, sorry, hold on.
When the position was initially created, the internal auditor, who was Steve Roser, I believe was the first one, if he did an audit of a department as a courtesy, we got it. Both sides got it.
Yeah.
The politics of things have changed what the positions and the functions actually did. So if in the event that the internal auditor is only reporting to the council and the problem's on the executive side of government, then we don't, or they don't have an opportunity to even engage in that conversation, and we'll never know until it comes out public. So they'll never know. Sorry.
And Paul is letting me know that go ahead, Laura, excuse me.
He does report to both branches.
Yes, that's what Paul, that's what Paul. So my question is, why does it fall under the legislative branch as opposed to
The
executive branch? If all other, yes.
I mean, my impression is it's because the county executive controls the budget and is the one who pays the bills and does all those sorts of things. And the only way that you have an independent auditor in order to overlook what the county executive is doing. That's the reason I think it's an independent audit.
But I think that's different from when we hire the outside budget auditors, PKS, when they come in and do something. The internal auditor was looking more at processes. I can tell you, we would get regular calls saying, hey.
Dallas, would you state who the "we" is for the public?
Okay, so when I was at Public Works.
Thank you. Thank you.
Steve Roser would call us up and say, hey, is there anything you want us to look at? And we'd be like, yeah, come out and take a look at maybe how we're doing the charges on the fuel system, whether or not it needs to be a key swipe or a PIN number or that kind of thing. Or, we had regular input with them. So yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And I just feel like that they're, again, going back to the budget side, it wasn't just the internal auditor. Then there was an internal auditor's assistant, and then again, it's the setting of budgets and using council or using county monies to then hire and expand staff with no oversight. Sure. On the budget process.
Thank you, Dallas. Sonia, you had your hand up.
No, when I'm looking at, what is this, 306, 305?
305? Yep.
Section C?
C?
C.
Yep.
Yeah, so where it specifies some things, we can all read. So,
Sure.
with the county council and county executive, and you see the last sentence there, does that address anything that we're talking about at all? Because,
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think that's internal. I think it's like,
That's a special audit.
yeah, I
Okay.
mean,
That's a
if they made a
special-
big
Yeah.
contribution or
Sure.
subsidized MAC, I don't know, I'm just pulling a name, to the tune of $250,000 a year, they have the right, the special auditor to go in and audit MAC to make sure the county's funds are being properly allocated.
okay. Or how about D? Is D the same? Because that's.
And that was what PKS has done.
That's an outside agency would be B. So to the members of the public, I just want you to know that we are going to wrap up and give you time. We apologize. To the committee, what I'm going to recommend is that this is probably a good stopping point.
Well, can I just say, when we've had a motion that was seconded.
I
do we wanna-
apologize. Thank you.
So, and I can clarify what the motion is. My
Yes.
thought is on section F, where it says council authority, the county council shall have the power to yada, yada, yada. I would say the county council and executive shall have the power to, and then also eliminate at the last part that, the exempt from executive veto.
So that's a motion. There was a second. Sharon made it. Discussion on that motion.
Which I thought, so that's what we were just doing. Do you want to?
Yes, sorry. Sorry, everybody. I'm trying here. I apologize. We just had the discussion on the motion on section F. I'll now call for a vote on that motion.
Oh, wait, I have just a point of order. What
Yes.
is, what's the procedure for the council to override the executive's veto?
Supermajority, I think.
Supermajority vote.
Yes.
Supermajority vote, which would be 5 in this case. 5 votes. And this is saying that this would be exempt from veto.
Does that seem?
Which is odd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it says right, the way it reads now in section F is all actions of the county council pursuant to this section shall be exempt from executive veto. However, if the council and executive are both part of the process that's in charge of the internal auditor, then I feel like taking away the executive veto unfairly hinders that.
That's a valid point. All right, let's call for a vote on that motion. All those in favor of the,
Repeat the motion.
yes, I will do the,
Okay.
go ahead, Dallas.
Okay, in section
Thank
F,
you, Phil.
changing the wording to the county council and executive.
That's on the first line.
That's on the first line. And then eliminating the last line that says all actions of the county council pursuant to this section shall be exempt from the executive veto.
Thank you, Dallas. Everybody clear on what we're voting on? And I apologize. All right, we will call for a vote on this motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm going to ask people to raise their hands because I couldn't quite tell. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All those opposed, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My Y-high math is failing me.
That's
Who did
right,
I
8
miss?
plus 6 is
I don't
14.
feel like
8 to
I
7 or
didn't
9 to
vote.
6? I'm sorry?
I didn't vote. I don't have enough information. I'm confused and
Okay.
I want to study it more and it's the end of the night, so I just
Fair
can't
enough.
decide.
So for right now, that motion passes 8 to 6, and as with all motions, we have the right to sort of bring it back up. Julie, I appreciate your honesty. It's a little brain foggy at this point. So this is the point that we will wrap up tonight's meeting. We will now ask for any members of the public who wish to make any comments to please come forward. We will also remind the public to please keep your comments polite and let's not cause any undue rhetoric and insults to the group. So with that, are there any thoughts from the public? Yes, sir, Mr. Palmer, please. Thank you for your patience.
Be polite.
Yes, sir, thank you. It is appreciated.
known to be
We
a
are
little-
volunteer citizens like you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, but you know, also, your discussion on 205 and 206 was kind of interesting because I was appointed to a position one time on the school board, and then I was elected, and then I'm fully elected to the Central Committee. So your views on the avenue that you take to get to these positions were kind of interesting to me, so I found that very informative. One thing I was wondering if I saw Mr. Wilbur somewhere in that 205 and 206, I thought it said that the people would be appointed by so-and-so and so-and-so, or a special election. Wouldn't a special election couldn't that cover the independent voter and have the registered independent voters vote for who they wanted to replace that person who is no longer there? Just a personal observation.
Yeah.
Okay. Another quick personal observation is I was at a county council meeting Tuesday, and I believe the only people that was there was Laura, Mr. Wilbur, and Councilwoman Ackley, and I was the only one in the audience at the time. And I listened to our
county administrator, this is a high-paid position in our county government, give a report on what was that called? A humanity cultural.
You're talking about the internal auditor.
Yeah, the internal auditor gave a report on
It was a workplace cultural audit.
workplace cultural audit. Now, I think in the organization I'm with, that would not fall under Jesse or anybody else in finance. It would fall under our human resource director. So I don't know if that was a very wise use of a very high-paid county official. But I would like to echo something from Councilwoman Ackley. You all provide a very good service to the county about, on this committee, you're making decisions that we're going to be following for a long time. And I do appreciate you all taking your time to step forward and do it, because I know it does take a lot out of your personal life to come here and do this, and you're going to be doing it for months. So, so I wish to thank you for that part.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
And I don't think I'm going to be here for all of those meetings, but I will be here for a number of them. I did have some comments on the time period between the charter review committees, 10 years. And I believe you were mentioning something about 10 years being a long time, and that is a long time. In today's age, things move very quickly. Changes happen very rapidly. And just a personal opinion, I think 10 years is too long before we hold a session such as this. I think it ought to be maybe half that time. Now, I also noticed at the beginning there were some problems with getting your format together because you didn't have much to follow from the last Charter Review Committee. But I noticed you got it together, and I'm sure Laura has it written down somewhere. And as you go along, I would like to see Laura develop a suggested format for the next Charter Review Committee that would give them a starting point, and maybe they could jump in a lot quicker and get things moving. So one final report, and probably not my positive one that some people will like, is the reasoning for maybe like the 5-year Charter Review Committee. Legislation has passed about enabling legislation for the county council to give tax credits to developers and investors in Wicomico County. It could be a good thing, or it could be a bad thing. We don't know, because I've seen both sides of it. But if it is a bad thing, I would hate to see 10 years go by before anything is done about it, because by that time our resources to our people in the county could be devastated. Now, I think when that is signed into law, that's going to come under your jurisdiction for review. Mr. Wilbur, isn't that correct? Because it'll be in the charter.
Well, it'll be a state law that the council could take action, would be enabled to take action if they wanted to. It's not so much as a charter amendment.
Well, that action that they could take could be maybe doing it every 5 years. And somebody mentioned a supermajority on something. This legislation was passed on a simple majority, just 4 people, and it's going to affect everybody in the entire county. It's not just like buying new school buses for the school system. This decision is going to affect everybody in the county. So instead of a simple majority, you might suggest it be changed to a supermajority.
Thank you.
And that's all I have to say.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service too, Mr. Palmer. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Yes, sir, John.
Hello, I'm John Rankin. I was glad to hear you say, Mike, earlier that any motion passed in this process can be revisited later. And I'm glad to hear that because during the discussion about central committees and having an independent compete for a county council seat, Mike, you asked the committee if an independent has ever served on the council, and the response was clearly no. Some took that to mean that the panel was debating a situation that doesn't need to be debated because it never arises. But the conversation shouldn't end there. The fact that an independent candidate has never served on the county council doesn't necessarily say that independents don't run for council. Instead, it could mean that independents are unfairly kept out of the process. And this applies to libertarians, socialists, etc. This is a problem that needs to be fixed, and this panel should consider finding a remedy to the fact that 20% of the registered voters in this county are being shut out of the election process. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Sir, Mr. Taylor.
I'll try to be brief, realizing the hour.
Yes,
Robert
thank you, sir.
Taylor.
Thank you, sir.
Just a couple of comments. I look like I do tonight because I didn't know until very shortly before 6 you were meeting tonight. I'd looked on the website for the agenda 2 or 3 days ago, didn't see anything, and just figured there's no meeting. Anyway, my first suggestion is let's put more stuff on the website, and let's put it up on the home page. The home page of the county website right now still has, I should say, a notice for the county executives meeting right here in this room a month ago on the budget. It's still noticed on the home page of the website. Let's take that off and put stuff up about this committee, which is much more important at this point than a meeting that was held a month ago. And I think there's some other things that should be publicized. Mr. Wilbur, I understand, is now being tasked with various research and recommendations. I think those should be made public on the website so that people can see them and comment on them as they may desire. One thing I want to address, kind of another personal matter, there were some suggestions tonight that there was a lot of tension between the council attorney, and for the last 3.5 years, roughly, that was me. For a year or so before that, it was Ed Baker, and the county attorney. Yeah, I think there were a couple of minor points where probably I disagreed with Mr. Wilbur or vice versa. I think on almost all of the big things that we probably agreed, and that is particularly true of the big issue with Robert Culver and some of the things he did. So I think that tonight, any suggestion to that nature was totally overblown. I'm not going to ask for an apology, I'm just making a statement. Now, turning to some of the things that were discussed tonight, just real quickly, term limits, and I agree on your decision on that. I don't disagree with everything, but I do want to point out the comment was made by someone that a lot of legislative bodies, essentially, and he mentioned federal and I think state, don't like legislative term limits, like them. I mean, that's just not the case. The federal level, the only term limit is the president, the executive. There's no term limits for Congress. In the state of Maryland, General Assembly, no term limits. There is for the governor. Now, some counties do have term limits. They're not all of them. Some of them do. As a general rule, the ones for the county executive in the county executive counties are much stricter, or more limited, I guess I should say, than they are for the council members. And in some counties, it only applies to the executive. And there are some counties that don't have any, like we do, and I think it should remain that way. Just trying to sum up real quickly and just go through a few other things, just to give you a heads up for next time, maybe on your compensation commission. If you look at section 406, this is county exec, it refers back to the section that you discussed tonight and says that essentially that procedure also applies to the county executive. Now, Ms. Hurley mentioned there is state law on this, and by the way, I have a memorandum that I did for the council a couple years ago. I think she's going to circulate that on this particular point. And I just will quickly say on that, the state law doesn't apply to the county executive. It's just that in the charter, we decided to make it that way some time ago. I don't know just when. Really quickly going, on some of the other things, I really think you need to look more thoroughly at other counties and discuss things in more substantive detail before you make your decisions. For example, filling vacancies. Every county has something on this, including the non-charter counties, because they have the same issue with commissioners. Look at what the other counties have. There are some counties, and I know because I've seen them, that have provisions for independence. Take a look at some of the other language. Don't just look at Frederick County. Frederick's fine. I'm not trying to shortchange Frederick County, but there's 23 other jurisdictions. They're not alone. And some of the other ones are a bit more sophisticated than Frederick County, I will say that. The other thing on the county attorney, now we've talked about that, and you know my position on it. I talked about that last time. It was briefly mentioned tonight. I think that it makes a lot of sense. I do agree with Mr. Sarbanes. I think he was alluding to the fact that maybe there ought to be a separate legislative body attorney. Most legislative bodies, and I'm talking of counties now, but higher up, have their own, have their own attorneys. Harford County, of course, has the system you discussed, you mentioned. Other counties, just about every other county has, charter county now, has something like we currently have about the council being able to appoint experts, consultants, and attorneys. That's not an unusual provision. But I think that as sophistication and things change, that the Harford County method makes an awful lot of sense, and I would suggest you think about that very, very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Laura, when is our next meeting, and where might our next meeting be? What do you think?
Hold on 1 second. Let me get the
Yep, no
calendar.
worries. Thank you, everybody, for your patience tonight. And I did not mean to put you on the spot. You can get back to us if you don't know. Sorry, Laura.
I believe it's the first Thursday in May. I think it's May the 6th at 6 p.m.
We are right here, May the
Yes,
6th at 6
yes,
p.m.
in this
Okay.
room.
Everybody, thank you so much for your attention tonight.
Yeah.
And right here, Laura, we're here on May the 6th, right?
Correct.
At 6 p.m.
Yes.
Okay. Everybody, have a great night. Thank you so much for the good discussions tonight. Thank you. We're adjourned.